Hi, and welcome back. I'm Jen, if we haven't met before. Wanted to do a quick intro to this video. It's actually going to be about emergencies that go beyond the emergency fund and how to prepare for them. So you're definitely going to want to stick around. But I filmed this video actually back in September of 2019 when I was in Washington, D.C. at FinCon, and I got to spend some time in person with Liz of Chief Mom Officer. And so she is going to tell us all about the important things that you need to be thinking of beyond the financial piece of emergencies that may happen. She lived through one, and she and her family really just went through the ringer, and they managed to get through it because of all the preparation that they had done outside of just having the money sitting in a fund available to them. So let's check it out. I'm Jen with the Budget Bounce, and I am here today with Chief Mom Officer,
hello,
also known as Liz. It is the official last day of FinCon 19.
Yes.
We just came from the closing keynote, which was amazing, with Sharon Epperson from CNBC. And I'm here because I am super excited to introduce Liz to you. But before we do that, I am exhausted. How about you?
I am so tired. I could use a coffee and about 10 naps at
Right.
this point. Yes.
Right. Kind of like Amy the other night, who said when she pays off all of her debt, she'd want to take a nap.
Yes.
That'd be the next thing she'd want to do.
Yes.
So
I think we could all use a nap by now.
yes, for sure. 4 crazy days and 4 crazy nights.
I know. FinCon is one of the craziest conferences that I've ever been to.
Yeah.
But definitely well worth the naps you must take on Sunday to recover.
Right. That's right. First of all, I want to say I'm so glad I got a chance to meet you in person.
Same here.
So Liz and I got an opportunity. We were kind of communicating a little bit in Twitter, and I was really lucky that Liz invited me to be a guest on one of her series, which we're going to talk about today. But we actually got an opportunity to meet here in person so we could do these videos.
Yes.
So this has been fantastic. I love the content that you do and all the things that you're doing to support and encourage women in personal finance, because while you and I don't really have any issues with that, there are a lot of people out there who don't know anything about it at all, or they just don't have the resources or the knowledge that they need to be able to do it well.
And a lot of times it's a very taboo topic too,
Yes.
right? So
Yeah.
people are afraid to talk to their friends or neighbors or
Yeah.
anyone about their financial situation and help they might need. So
Yeah, absolutely. I really want the Budget Bounce community to know more about you and what you do on your site. Can you start by telling us how Chief Mom Officer came about?
sure. So I started the site Chief Mom Officer about 3 years ago.
Okay.
It'll be 3 years in October. And
Wow. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Anniversary? I'm
Yes,
not sure.
I don't know what you call Blogiversary? I think it's
Sure.
called.
Blogiversary. We'll go with
Yes.
that.
So I really started it because I've been a personal finance nerd and fan for decades almost.
Yeah.
Like ever since JD Roth was chiseling, personal finance blogs into the stone tablets of the internet.
Sure. Yep.
Back in the day, I'd been reading them, and after a while, I really enjoyed reading them, but I noticed that I really couldn't find content by someone like me. So,
Sure.
for context, I'm the breadwinning mom of 3.
Yeah.
My husband's a stay-at-home dad,
Yeah.
and I work a corporate job full-time. So
Right.
most of the women that I found in the personal finance space, first, it was kind of hard to find a lot of women back then. Luckily, that's changing rapidly.
Yes.
But the women that I did find were primarily stay-at-home moms or moms who'd work part-time, or they wrote about other financial topics like around the basics, which I'd already kind of mastered.
Sure.
So I thought to myself, I got a bright idea. Well, why don't I start a blog and I can talk a little bit about my life and stay-at-home dad husband and some of the things that have happened to us. So that's how the site came about.
Okay. So the post that really drew me to you and really like all of a sudden I felt like we were kind of like kindred spirits was the one where you actually shared it a couple of years ago, I think, and then you reshared it recently, and it was about emergencies that go beyond the emergency fund. And I thought today's closing keynote with Sharon Epperson was so in line with that. She was, if you guys don't know who Sharon Epperson is, she was a closing keynote here at FinCon today. She's from CNBC, and 3 years ago now, she suffered from a ruptured brain aneurysm, and she survived. And so she has quite the story to tell. I'd actually seen it on a news show somewhere along the line before she came to FinCon, so I knew about that. But it's a very inspiring story about somebody coming back from the true brink of death and that kind of thing. But she was talking about how important it is that we not only share the message with others, but we also take care of ourselves that way. And your article really spoke to that, and all the things that you guys did right, along with some things that you wish that you had done better.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about that? And by the way, I'm going to put a link to the article in the description box below so you guys can see it. It'll take you directly to it. But I do want you to share a little bit about that while we're here.
Sure. So back in 2012, when I was 31 or 32 and had 2 young kids, my husband underwent a surgery that went very, very wrong.
And it was just a typical surgery, right?
It was an abdominal surgery, so there were some risks involved, but it wasn't exactly considered an extremely high risk surgery.
Okay.
But something went terribly wrong. He had to have an emergency surgery, and then he went into septic shock, and he was in the ICU for a week on a ventilator in a coma. And then after that, for several weeks, he was in the hospital and in rehabilitation. He's had to have multiple surgeries since that time. So it was very difficult. He was away from home and in the hospital for over a month.
Wow.
So we were suddenly faced with dealing with all of that. Plus, he had been the primary caregiver for our children at that point in time. And so suddenly had to find care for them, start paying for daycare. The income that he had been bringing in was gone. So expenses went way up and our income went way down.
Wowzers.
All at the same time, while trying to deal with everything that came with that kind of thing happening, and especially at such a young age, it's nothing that we ever expected. I mean, you never expected, I think, no matter what your age.
Yeah.
But especially when you're 32.
Sure.
Like, you just don't, it doesn't even cross your mind that those kind of things are going to happen. So when I look back at that, we were better prepared than many, but there's a lot of ways we could have been even better prepared for such an emergency. So we were better prepared because I think I'd always been a bit of a saver and investor.
Yeah.
So we had some extra cushion where I could cut back on savings and investment and free up some money to pay for all these extra bills that were suddenly coming our way.
Right.
And we had an emergency fund. Wasn't huge, but we had one, so we could use that as well. So those were some good things that we'd done right. But at the time, we didn't have a will because we were 32 and 37.
Who's thinking about that?
Yeah, well, we thought about it, we talked about it, but like it wasn't one of those urgent things that you need to do. It's like, well, it's one of those, we should do that one day.
Yeah,
we'll talk about that. But there's some, big questions you have to answer, like who's going to take care of the kids if we both pass away, and things we don't like to talk about. Yeah. So it's one of those easy to push off kind of things. Yeah. So we didn't have that, and I know, we didn't have. He had been laid off during the Great Recession, so he didn't have any disability insurance at the time because he hadn't been bringing in an income, which meant that there was no income to replace what he had been getting through unemployment.
Right.
And generally, too, what was one of the most frustrating things for me that I was surprised about was just how much I didn't know of things that he did around the house. Like I would get abnormally upset about the fact that I didn't know what day the garbage was supposed to go out.
Sure. Yeah.
All those simple, the things that sound so simple, but you kind of take for granted that the other person's going to be there to do those things, so you don't pay attention or you don't ask.
I can't even imagine. Along with the stress of everything that's going on in your life.
Exactly. Yeah. So how do I start the lawnmower? I don't know.
Right. So this is truly, I mean, you went from having somebody who took care of your household while you focused on bringing in the income for the family, the cash flow.
Yes.
And so even though you had things to help with cash flow while you needed to be off work, that didn't replace all of these other things.
Right. And I wasn't able to take a tremendous amount of time off work either because I was bringing in the income, and at the time my company didn't have any caregiver leave or anything to replace my income. The only option was unpaid FMLA. So I did not take that. I took some vacation time and then worked through this whole experience. And at the time I was getting my MBA too. So
that's right. Yes, you were in school. Yes. You were in school. Were you at the end of it?
I was toward the end, so I was in the back quarter.
Yeah.
If I was earlier in the MBA process, I probably would have quit.
Yeah.
Entirely. But my husband insisted that I keep going. It was very difficult to juggle, and I did slow down the process quite a bit to finish. I did get my MBA in 2013, which was nice. Yes.
Great.
So he's very proud of that, but it was definitely a very trying time.
Yeah. So there's a lot to think about. I mean, an emergency. So we've had some emergencies at our house this summer that have not been, that I've talked about quite a bit on my channel through my budgeting videos, that have impacted our cash flow and that kind of thing, but they're nothing like this. I mean, I've been complaining about, we had to wipe out our $1,200 emergency fund and then some. We actually had to have about 3 times that much to get through the things that were happening with us, but nobody was sick, no one was hurt, and we weren't dealing with any of these additional things that you're talking about. They were really, I mean, when you put it in perspective, having to go get new car insurance and figure out how to pay $1,500 all at once is, that's a mere inconvenience.
Yep.
But while it added stress to my life, to our family's life, it was nothing like if one of us had become ill. And actually, we went through something similar in 2017. And this is really the reason I wanted to talk to Liz about this, is because when it happened to us, not to this severity, but my husband did not work for 10 months. We had nothing in savings. And if you guys have been watching my channel from the beginning, especially in the first few months that I was posting videos, I talked a lot about our situation and the fact that we were already on a terrible trajectory with our money. We were making awful decisions every month, over month for 9 years, while we did not live on a budget at all. And in 2017, when Matt got sick, just out of the blue, and his it was mental illness, excuse me, severe anxiety and depression. It was debilitating. He couldn't hold a conversation. He couldn't even finish a thought some days. He couldn't eat. He couldn't sleep. It was very debilitating. And the first check that he missed, we couldn't pay all of our debts.
Yep.
We had spread ourselves so thin. I realized, holy cow, his income is paying our debts every month. Wow. So we had plenty to live on. Our house was never in jeopardy. Our vehicle was never in jeopardy that we had. We actually had 2 car loans at the time. One was almost done. None of that was in jeopardy. We weren't going to lose our home or anything, but all of a sudden, for the first time at age, I think I was 45 when it happened. For the first time in my adult life, I was not paying bills. I had never not paid bills because of this. So the things that were happening though, we were lucky that while Matt couldn't work, he was not bedridden. He was not in a hospital. He was at home. He was able to do some things around the house that he wouldn't be able to do if he was working every day. So we kind of had some advantages, but still, I mean, to think about the level of emergency that can happen, thinking about you, thinking about Sharon Epperson. I happen to know someone who was my sister knows someone who was in her 20s and had a brain aneurysm and survived. And it took her 3 years to get back to being able to work.
Yep.
And those kinds of things can happen to any of us. So the 3 to 6 month emergency fund that many people who are out here watching these videos are working toward is just the beginning. There's so much more to it than just that.
Yes. So beyond an emergency fund, I like to think of an emergency plan. So what will you do if you're hit by one of these kinds of emergencies? Because as you say, it can happen to anyone, it can happen at any time, and it can take any form. And what you don't want in the middle of a medical crisis or something, your house burning down. I know a personal finance blogger whose home unfortunately was lost in the Tubbs fire. Right? There's just tragedies, unfortunately, that happen every day, and they happen to real people, and they happen to me, and they happen to you.
Yes.
And it's an unfortunate reality, but what you want is to prepare in a time when you're not experiencing an emergency, not just through having a fund set aside, although that's very important.
Sure.
But also in knowing what would you do? What order would you take your accounts from? What bills could you pay, not pay? Do you have the right insurance? Or do you have a solid foundation set? So if one of those emergencies does hit you, you don't have to worry about money on top of everything else that you have to worry about.
Right.
Because if going through all that, if I had to add on top of it risk of bankruptcy or risk of losing the home that me and my kids and my husband lived in,
man,
I mean, that would just make an already terrible situation a million times worse.
Absolutely. So in addition to introducing you to Liz, I really wanted this to be the topic of our discussion today so that I could really reinforce the importance of an emergency fund. And for those of you who are wondering why we're not paying anything extra to our debts, why that's so important to me, getting the money out of the way so that then I can focus on debts so we can get that done, and then we can focus on doing an emergency plan. We have some things in place, but certainly not enough. If something like this was to happen to our family, we would be in a world of hurt right now, and so therefore getting the debts paid off is so important. Actually, do you have anything else you'd like to add on that topic?
The only other thing that I'd want to add is something that I wish that I'd had, that I've seen around, like people doing, is what's called like an emergency binder. Or I know that one of my friends here at FinCon, Smart Money Mama, she sells a great emergency binder. Sometimes you can always also find them elsewhere, and it's really just like a list of what do you need to know if something were to happen to me. Like, when do the dogs need to eat? Who's their vet? Who's the mortgage with? Where do you pay these bills? What day does the garbage go out? So kind of like a will, except instead of it being like your last and final wishes, it's more of, hey, if something happens to me and I'm incapacitated, here's all the information you need to know. So again, you don't have to worry about money, or you don't have to worry about all those practicalities. When something bad happens, you just pick it up and go.
Okay, so organizing it all in one place.
Yes, organizing it all in one place and making sure that key people in your life know where it is. So in case, say, unfortunately you have a brain aneurysm like Sharon, and a loved one wants to know how they can make sure to pay your mortgage while you're recovering, right? They'll be able to figure that out. So something like that, preparing information and making sure key people know where it is really important.
Yeah, and another thing that just came to mind that we haven't mentioned, that would be an issue is, so when Matt was off work, he was only able to get 6 weeks of disability. Paid out by the company. He had short-term disability, but they fought it and we fought it, and no matter how many times we went back and tried to appeal, the insurance company who held the insurance would not approve it. And so even if you can get it approved, there is a lag time between when you can actually file the claim and actually get the money.
Correct.
So, and sometimes there's a lag time for filing the claim even. So this can go out to 2 or 3 months before you start seeing a payment.
Unfortunately.
So that is another part of this, that you're jockeying all of those things around during that time.
Same thing with Social Security disability. Typically, unless you have certain specific medical conditions that qualify you for immediate disability approval, you have to wait over a year of being disabled before you can collect Social Security disability.
As an HR manager, I have helped some folks through that before.
And you must be familiar with it. So if you don't have short-term disability
or long-term
disability, you have to keep in mind Social Security disability will only be there for you after a year. Again, barring certain medical conditions that give you immediate approval.
And they won't, and here's the thing, it's not like on your 1-year anniversary of not working, they give you the money. It doesn't work like
Unfortunately,
that. It is a very long, drawn out process.
And they usually deny you, and then you have to appeal, and it's a whole
They make you work for it.
Yes, and again, while you're ideally in the middle of a bad situation, you're not worrying also about how do I fill out all this government paperwork and fight them for this disability payment. So this is why I was so drawn to this particular article. There's so much meat in it. So like I said, I'm going to put a link to that down below, so you'll find that down in the description box, and you should definitely go check it out. You may already have many of the things that Liz has outlined here, what we've talked about, and also what's in her article, but her blog post, but just go ahead and go check it out. Make sure you haven't missed anything.
So the other thing I just want to touch base on is you have some tools out there on your site as well. There are several things that are out there. I love your money musings.
Thank you.
So
those are my random thoughts that are related to money but don't quite go into category.
Right. So her site is very well put together. It's very easy to find them. Just go to the menu and there's a money musings section and it's hilarious. Just look at the outline. That in and of itself is hilarious. Anyhow, well, thank you so much for sharing. So let's talk about where everybody can find you. So it's not just Instagram and Twitter.
Yeah.
You've also got...
I have my website, chiefmomofficer.org. So that's where you can find my money musings, kids and money, all of my articles and series. And I also recently started a YouTube channel, which I call my set of YouTube experiments. So I'm enjoying experimenting with it and learning how to edit videos and how the whole video production process works.
Yeah.
So you can also find me there.
Okay, great.
Search Chief Mom Officer.
Yeah. All right, so guys, now you've met Chief Mom Officer. You can go check her out in all the different places, and I will put links to all of those things down below so that you can find her easily. Make sure that you subscribe, follow, whatever it is that you need to do. Sign up for her email. You'll learn a little bit about narwhals along the way.
Narwhal cakes.
Yes, it's fantastic. It's great stuff. So you're also going to learn about some money.
Yes.
So
cakes and narwhal cakes and money go together.
Yes.
Like peanut butter and bananas.
Sure. Okay, guys. Well, thanks for joining us. And that's all I've got for you today. Until next time.